It was 8:07 a.m. on a Saturday morning. We were getting ready to go to the farmer's market. I was in the living room sipping coffee. Our nephew rushed in with his cell phone, showing it to us, this message.
That's a startling thing to see on your phone.
I ran to see if it was on my phone, and it was on my phone too.
Our phone started going off with this alarm system.
I was one of over 1 million people who all got the message on our cell phones. Ballistic missile threat, inbound to Hawaii, seek immediate shelter.
This is not a test.
Inbound ballistic missile.
This is not a drill.
Fell in love with a crooked world and everything that comes with it. I love when you fake it, won't you? I once believed, but I took it all. Left myself with none of it. I love when you take it, won't you?
This is no joke. Like, there's a missile coming to Hawaii right now. I don't know what to do. We gotta figure
Hawaii. A missile may impact on land or sea within minutes. This is not a drill.
At first, it was this feeling of, can this be real? Everyone was calling 911 at the same time, so we couldn't get through.
If you are indoors, stay indoors. If you are outdoors, seek immediate shelter in a building.
I immediately thought of my dear friend, Felicia Cowton, so I started to dial her.
That morning, I was with 3 friends and we were in a car, and just as we pulled up right in front of my house, all 4 of our phones started going off with this ballistic missile alert.
After what seemed like an eternity, she called me back. And she said, Cynthia, the county's telling us to take shelter. We could be hit in minutes.
This is not a drill. Take immediate action measures.
I have been trained when I was an engineer as an emergency shelter survey worker. I knew there was nothing that would actually protect us. So if it was really coming, we'd do best to be hit by the blast.
And so the first thing was, where do we go? We decided to shelter in a meditation cave on a neighbor's property. And then it was, what do I take with me? I grabbed a bag and I started throwing things in it.
People are standing around looking up at the sky and trying to figure out what to do right now.
People responded in different ways. You saw the images of families crawling into a sewer, people panicking and crying. And some people I heard said, oh, I'm just going to go out and surf. My response, like maybe a lot of people's, was just total disbelief. Like, what? Is this a joke? Is this real? Do I get food? Do I call my family and say goodbye? I don't have time to call people. Let's go in the center of the house, which is a small bathroom in the middle of the house, and it's the most protected part of the house. We're kind of just huddled in there. And then I was like, if something bad happens, we need water. And my son, who was like 13 at the time, I think he thought, why is he putting water in the tub? And my wife understood, but I think it's a human instinct. You know, impending doom, I want to be with the people who I care about.
I started driving. It was only at that moment that I allowed myself to think of my eldest daughter, who had just left for Los Angeles. And I thought, I need to call her. And I said, Mackenzie, I don't know if you've heard, but we've all gotten a message on our cell phones that we're going to be hit by a nuclear missile. We're going to shelter in the cave, but I just want you to know that I love you. And she said, Mom, I love you too. It was the moment that really changed everything for me. I stood there frozen, and then I thought, wait a second. What if this is the beginning of one of those accidental nuclear wars? What if this is the beginning of the end of life as we know it? My background since 1978, my first trip to the Soviet Union, has been in US-Soviet and US-Russia relations, and then Russian studies, and then citizen diplomacy work, people-to-people work, and that's the work that really I did in the 1980s during the Cold War. It took our government 38 minutes to get the word out on our cell phones that it was a false alarm. And even with everything I knew about nuclear weapons, nuclear war was unimaginable to me until I lived through those 38 minutes. Now it lives inside of me, and it's never going to go away until we eliminate nuclear weapons.
As it may seem, so I'm searching for the light as I drown in my insides. When I wake up, here I am in another dream where I can't even see signs of the sun. Every time I come undone, so help me come alive, 'cause I'm living in a...
They called off the alert, and then we have a very forgiving community here.
I wasn't angry. Someone made a mistake, as people do.
I accept responsibility for this. This is my team. We made a mistake.
I write about security issues. I write about the impact of the United States in foreign policy, how it affects particularly people and the environment in Asia and the Pacific region. So there was, political tension with the US and North Korea. This is during the Trump administration and all the threats and taunts and jabs by exchange between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump.
The North Koreans have tested more weapons in the past couple of months of 2017 than in the years previously.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
So we have somebody who's not quite up to the task of handling these dangerous weapons and unhinged enough that they might actually use it.
There's a lot of people up there.
And then on top of that, in Hawaii, because of what had happened earlier when North Korea had fired some missiles in the direction of Guam, I knew they were going to do the first test of this new missile warning. So that had all happened in 2017. Early January of 2018, we get this text message. There were no sirens.
I'm the founder of Women Transforming Our Nuclear Legacy and nuclearwakeupcall.earth. I am also a documentary filmmaker. I work for the abolition of nuclear weapons. I grew up during the Cold War. I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Crisis on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact the purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
I grew up hearing that the Soviet Union was always going to be our enemy and that we were all most likely going to die in a nuclear war.
The awesome mushroom cloud is observed closely by both military and civilian personnel.
Something about that enemy story didn't sit well with me. I told my parents when I was very young that I was going to be going to Russia someday. I started studying Russian on my own during the Cold War. And there were some projects that I was involved in that specifically related to nuclear weapons, like interviewing Soviet kids about their fears of nuclear war, things like that. But I really felt that it was important to work on changing the relationship through the power of people-to-people diplomacy. There was a handful of us during this work. And then to witness people rising up all over the world, and especially between the United States and Russia, connecting. We saw this triumph of people over politics. When the Cold War came to an end, for a period, Russia was not our enemy, but the trauma was never healed in the larger relationship. I never imagined that would be where we are today with US-Russia relations and the horrific, brutal invasion of Ukraine. There are so many reasons why the risk is greater today than it was during the Cold War. We have hypersonic missiles that fly 20 times the speed of sound. And we have dual-capable missiles that can carry conventional or nuclear weapons. We have really a multipolar nuclear world.
After the end of the Cold War, the public rightly thought that it was over. But the politicians should have known better and stayed in that arms control and solidified, and they didn't. The Bulletin is an organization that focuses on man-made threats to human existence. We come out of the nuclear era. Part of the Manhattan Project started here, and we were founded by scientists who understood the dangers associated with their creation. The bulletin sets the doomsday clock. It was created by an artist who was married to a Manhattan Project scientist. Back in 1947, it was the first cover of the first magazine that the bulletin published. In 1949, when the Soviets tested their first atomic weapon, the editor of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists moved the hands of the doomsday clock closer to midnight. So suddenly, this passive art piece became active. As science has evolved, so has the doomsday clock. And it now really answers two fundamental questions. Is humanity safer or at greater risk this year compared to last year when we set it? And is humanity safer or at greater risk this year compared to the 75 plus years now that we've been setting it? It's a very blunt instrument, but it's a way to very concisely and immediately convey how are we doing. And we're not doing very well. The bulletin declared climate as an existential threat decades ago. No longer could we talk about is humanity safer or greater risk without including climate. The founders of our organization understood that science was moving very quickly, bringing huge opportunities, but also real risks. We're not investing in the global guardrails that would make us feel safe.
Every effort should be made to end nuclear tests. These were our words in 2010, when the General Assembly declared the International Day Against Nuclear Tests on 29th of August. Yet today, in this assembly, there is little reason to celebrate. Global military spending reached a record $2.2 trillion in 2022. Are we now safer? Not at all. We are closer than any other time in this century to global catastrophe.
There was a time where it was thought that we could end up with 25, maybe 30 states in the world that could have nuclear weapons. So let's be clear, we have 9. That's way less than 25 or 30. When we look at the numbers of weapons that are in existence around the world, the number is way, way down on what it was immediately post-Cold War. But as many would say, for as long as nuclear weapons exist, there is the risk that they could be used.
And the time for launching is at hand.
90% of the world's nuclear weapons are controlled by the United States and Russia. There's only one bilateral nuclear agreement left between the US and the Russians, and that even is about to expire. Since 2010, what you've seen in the nuclear space is an absolute dismantling of the nuclear arms control architecture. And I believe that is why at the very global level, our failure to respond to keep humanity safe is siphoning down to the individual on the street that feels like, whoa, you know, someone's not watching the shop here.
The situation we face at the moment is probably a surprise to many, that we would be in a situation where there are even threats of the use of nuclear weapons. We also have the possibility of further nuclear tests, concerns about nuclear material in various places. So there are dark clouds, there are no doubt.
И при угрозе территориальной целостности нашей страны, для защиты России и нашего народа, мы, безусловно, используем все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Это не блеф.
For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
地球は小さなね一つの船に見えます。宇宙船地球号、地球という名前ですよね。でその船に乗ってるんですみんな世界中がね。で誰も助からない。今まだ火星にも行けない、月にも行けません。だから私たちはみんなその船のクルーです。クルーメンバーです。すぐに核兵器使われば1回で終わりになりますからね。これが全員死にました。私の同級生です。で私がここにいます。だからこれ亡くなった人たちは何も物が言えないんですね。で私が代わりに言うことが今は彼らの慰めになるんじゃないかと思ってます。1945年8月6日広島の牛田という爆心地から 2.3 キロ離れた場所で、その朝転校した学校へ行く途中でした。友達を待っていたんですね。で桜の木の下におりました。そうすると友達が敵だ B20 だと言ったので、桜の影から出て空を見上げました。そうそう、その途端にピカッとものすごい光線が襲ってきました。そしてもう辺りは真っ白になって何も見えなくなりました。でその次にあれですね、爆風で私は吹き飛ばされたんですね。水ぶくれがいっぱいできてやけどがですね、それでもうすごい激痛が襲ってきました。で人々はみんな手をこうして上に上げてね、こう逃げてきました。たくさんの人がですね、本当に幽霊かゾンビのあれですね、形ですよね。それでどうしてこうして人がやってるか皆さんわかりますかね。私にはよくわかるんです。なぜならあれですね、もう本当に肩からあれですね、皮膚がむけ落ちるんですね、やけどする。爪のところで止まってみんなここで皮膚をぶら下げてるわけです。私は今でもトマトのねバーベキューの時トマト焼きますね。そうすると皮がつるっとむけます。それを見るとトラウマが出て、それでゾッと今でもします。人間で同じことが起こった。原爆の時に怪我もやけどもない人ですね、その人が本当に健康そうな人が死んでいきました。だからみんな不思議に思いました。それは放射能のことを知らなかった。その人たちの数は14万人の広島の死んだ人の数に入ってないです。This year, I will get very good plum. Sunlight is very important. これはすごい酸っぱくて辛いです。85歳でやっと梅干しがうまくつけられるようになりました。原爆の時に破壊された町の家の破れた天井から青い空を見ました。でその青空を見た時に、昨日と同じ空がある、また明日もあるかもしれない。Fortunately, I was able to marry and had a happy family life. My husband did not seem to mind that I was a hibakusha. But when our first child was born, he was scared. He seriously checked the baby's fingers and toes. Then I realized that he had been worried about the damage of the bomb on our baby. 2人子供が私におりますので、70歳まで話をしなかったので、子供たちは原爆の私の被害を知りませんでしたね。でも最近はこの十何年間かもうはっきり分かったので、息子のお嫁さん、息子は東京に住んで仕事をしております。お嫁さんが 長崎の被爆者の孤児の娘です。それはそのことを知らずに2人は恋愛をしました。結婚しました。だけどどこかでその自分のトラウマを慰めなければならなかった。そうするとアートで自分のメッセージを入れる。本当にポイントで入れてます。みんなに見せるアートじゃなかった。私は自分のためにアートを作った。そしてそれを作ってみんなどの作品にも原爆のイメージが入ってます。そして今はここにね皆さんが世界から来て、そしていろんな若い人がねここでお話を聞いて、だから今あっちこっち行ってますよ。国にすると83カ国かな。My generation will be the last to tell you about this event. Nobody on this planet should suffer this same tragedy.
Today, the members of the Science and Security Board move the hands of the doomsday clock forward, the closest it has ever been to midnight. It is now 90 seconds to midnight.
This year, we set the doomsday clock at 90 seconds to midnight. It's the closest it has ever been. And we mean it. We think we're in a particularly dangerous time.
If you kind of go through the exercise of what are the things that would have these dire consequences, but what's the likeliest one, then you end up with things like, climate change, which is clearly happening. Same with nuclear. If there were a full nuclear exchange, we're talking about thousands of weapons, all of which are now ready to go. It could be happening right now as we're doing this interview. The missiles could be flying and we'll never get to the end.
We got letters from people who say, it feels like something is wrong. It feels like something is broken. Thank you, for cutting through the noise that's out there and saying it, that we need to pay attention to these issues of climate change, of advancing science and technology, of the current nuclear situation, of bio risks and artificial intelligence, all these things.
You end up mostly worrying about these kind of more pedestrian things. Pandemics, nuclear war, AI, climate, the things we're doing to ourselves. I think that's the good sign. I mean, we know what we're doing. We could fix that, stop it, change things. There's hope.
As I walked away from the cave, my first feeling was gratitude. It was this feeling of, my God, I'm still here. We're all still here. I looked around and everything looked new. I just stood there and watched the palm trees dancing in the wind. It was like all my senses were enhanced. And then I thought, you need to share this. Because it was an apocalypse that didn't happen. It was this feeling of a near miss that gave people the chance to imagine it. So one of the things that I do is a simulation where I take people to face the impossible choices, questions, decisions we had to make. And I ask people to really think about if they could just call one person, who would that one person be and what would they want to say? And that has a way of actually making the nuclear issue personal, taking it out of this abstract thinking in our heads that it's too big, that there's nothing I can do. If nuclear weapons can destroy all of us and all we love, we all have a stake and a role to play in eliminating them.